Hello again, everybody. It is time once again for the Silver Bullets podcast. I am Michael Citro.
And I'm Chip Minnich.
Chip, you and I are going to talk a little bit about the Buckeyes and the Scarlet Knights as the Ohio State University football team traveled to Piscataway, New Jersey, not far from where I was born. I was born in New Jersey, and by the time I was 4, I think I had done everything there was to do there, and my family moved to Ohio.
Okay, I never knew that.
Yeah.
Never knew.
So, the Buckeyes and the Scarlet Knights, and you and I thought this was going to be one of those annoying games that kind of where hard-nosed Graciano team hangs around, and Ohio State needs to pull away at the end, and this was not that game.
No, it wasn't. And I mean, I certainly, speaking for myself, I'm happy to say that I was wrong. I think that this is the kind of performance that I think most Ohio State fans, including myself, have kind of been waiting for so far in 2021, like this kind of dominant performance. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's absolutely a sight, a sight very welcomed.
Yeah. The Buckeyes went right in and wasted no time getting to work. And I think the big takeaway from the first half, really, other than the very lopsided halftime score, was that clearly C.J. Stroud's shoulder was not in great shape the first few weeks of the season, because with a week off to rest it, oh boy, did that kid look sharp.
Yes, he did. And I'm glad Ryan Day rested him last week against Akron. Obviously, he wouldn't have been needed, but like you just said, he looked very, very sharp. He looked completely in command. And we'll talk about it, not only his passing, but I think, maybe I'm mistaken, but it seemed like for the first time this season, he actually looked comfortable on some run-pass options, more so than we saw in the previous games when he was playing.
Yeah, there didn't seem to be any hesitation or fear or, apprehension of any kind when it came to that. Let's first get to our score predictions. We're going to have to split this one, Chip, because you had 34-21, I had 40-27, so I was closer to Ohio State's score. You were closer to Rutgers' score, as the actual score was 52-13. So we're going to have to split the points here.
Okay, that's fine.
As I mentioned, though, they came right out of the gate, wasted no time. Travion Henderson goes 44 yards for a touchdown on the first drive. Then the second drive is very quickly makes it 14-0 as Denzel Burke gets an interception return for a touchdown. His first career pick, and that was nice to see. Ohio State tacked on a field goal, and then a Garrett Wilson 32-yard pass made it 24-0, still in the first quarter before you really anything could get going. And then Rutgers did hit back right before the end of the first quarter. Aaron Cruikshank took a pass across the middle, got to the sideline, and just outran everybody, made a big play, but the extra point was blocked. So you had a 24-6 score after one quarter.
One of the things that I thought was one of the crucial moments early in the game in terms of a momentum killer for Rutgers and a momentum builder for Ohio State was in Rutgers' first possession when they attempted a fake punt that Ohio State was able to snuff out. Mm-hmm. And immediately, within 2 plays, of the first pass was to Jeremy Ruckert, and then the very next play, Travion Henderson went, untouched to put them up 7-0. As you mentioned, Denzel Burke had the interception return 14-0. The game was, for all intents and purposes, over. I know you mentioned the long touchdown, but I thought psychologically, that was a major, major killer for Rutgers at that onset of the game.
Yeah, even that Cruikshank touchdown felt more like a hiccup than anything to worry about. It was, they made a big play, but the kid is a good player. He was formerly a good player elsewhere for a bigger program in the Big Ten, and we knew he was fast. We knew he was a quality athlete, and he made a big play. And it was a combination of a couple of things there on that play that didn't work out for Ohio State. But I didn't really get concerned. It was just a little bit annoying after the strongest start of the season for the Buckeyes to see that hiccup. But it did end up just being a hiccup in the game for the Buckeyes. And I agree with you about the fake punt, because you knew that Rutgers was going to throw some trick plays in here. You knew that they were going to have to try to scratch and claw and fight for every possession to try to keep those possessions alive, try to maybe steal a possession somewhere. And it just didn't seem like a particularly tricky place to try a fake punt, or even a point in the game where you're already expecting something tricky to come, and they run the punt unit out on the field. And it just didn't look like Ohio State was any kind of surprised by it. In fact, it was nearly intercepted and potentially could have been taken to the house on the interception had Cam Martinez hung on to that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure Cam Martinez is kicking himself for not coming up with that interception. But yeah, I mean, it certainly seemed as though, like I said, that, Rutgers, they were watching it from home. They were going to certainly pull out the bag of tricks, and it didn't surprise me at all that they tried that. I'm just very pleased that Ohio State was so ready for it, and like you said, should have probably come up with an interception at that point.
Yeah, Rutgers did have an opportunity to make another big play in the first, I think it was the first quarter, it may have been the second, where they had a third down call that was perfect for the defense that they ended up getting, and it was a swing pass to the running back out in the flat, and there was just so much pressure up the middle on the blitz that it was overthrown by Noah Vedral, and it was overthrown. But if he catches that ball, he's got a blocker in front of him and a lot of green space. So that could have been potentially another big play for the Scarlet Knights.
Like I said, this was 2 weeks in a row. I'm not ready to say all the issues on the defensive side of the ball are fixed, but it was reassuring to see that the defense was playing much better than we saw them previously play this season.
Right. The second quarter began with a Mitch Rossi 1-yard touchdown pass from C.J. Stroud. Good for Mitch, bad for Master Teague, who was ruled to have scored a touchdown, and I don't know about your television, Chip, but my television showed zero evidence that it wasn't a touchdown. It's possible that it wasn't, but there were no camera angles that showed for a fact that Master Teague was down with the ball short of breaking the plane.
Yeah, I agree with you. I thought Master Teague definitely deserved that touchdown. I'm happy for Mitch Rossi. Mm-hmm. If anything, because I think he's kind of one of those unsung heroes of the offense in terms of doing the dirty work, in terms of blocking and things of that nature. So I was happy to see that his very first reception as a Buckeye was a touchdown.
How cool is it to see a number 34 lining up at fullback in an Ohio State backfield?
Yeah, we're old school. I mean, it's a different conversation, but I mean, we'll talk about Master Teague more, as the game review continues. Maybe I'm mistaken. I have a feeling that Master Teague at the next level is going to be a fullback. I think that is going to be some team is going to find him and use he's obviously, I mean, he's a capable receiver. He's a willing blocker. I think of him as I don't want to say a prototypical, but a solid fullback at the NFL level. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, you could be right. We'll have to see how that unfolds. So Rossi gets the touchdown. It's 31-6. Jeremy Ruckert tacks on a 19-yard touchdown reception. It's 38-6. And Chris Olave from 56 yards out makes it 45-6 at the half. Game, set, match, Chip.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, it was. I mean, like if this was a boxing match, the ref would have waved it off. And, said you're out. It's like it was basically they would have given Rutgers the standing 8 count and waved him off and said like, hey, we don't want you to get hurt. But yeah, the second half, by and large was just Ryan Day calling off the dogs, and rightfully so, resting the starters, as we will discuss momentarily.
Yeah, the starters did come back out to make the halftime adjustments, get one more drive in, and Chris Olave goes in from 11 yards out from Stroud to make it 52-6. And Rutgers scored an by the way touchdown. I think their third quarterback threw it to Youngblood, 12 yards for a touchdown. The final score is 52-13. And this is not what we expected when we saw Rutgers go on the road to Michigan and give the Wolverines a very good game. In fact, they had some opportunities to score more points earlier in the game than they did, and then they had the ball last with a chance to go tie the game and ended up turning it over. But you and I thought this was going to be a little more difficult, especially the way that Ohio State's defense had been playing, the way that Rutgers had stood up to Ohio State last year, stood up to Michigan 2 years in a row. We didn't expect this to be like a typical Ohio State-Rutgers game, and it ended up being a typical Ohio State-Rutgers team. And I'm left with three questions because I don't know what this game, if anything, it says about Ohio State. I don't know what it says about Rutgers, and I also don't know what it says about Michigan.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, very good points. And here's the answer to all three that I'm going to give you, which is going to be completely unsatisfying. To be determined. And I mean that without any snark, because the reality is I'm looking at this and it's impossible to be completely objective as an Ohio State fan, as we podcast and discuss Ohio State. You look at the results of the previous week. Oh, that was just Akron. And then you look at the results of this week and it's like, okay, well, that's a rebuilding Rutgers team. And so you kind of, okay, well, defensively they look better, but like the caveat, the word but you knew going into this, that Rutgers offensively is not nearly as formidable as their upcoming opponent, Maryland. They have, in coming weeks, Indiana, Nebraska starting to show a lot. You know what I mean? Like, there's so many things. So it's like you don't know if Ohio State truly has turned the corner. I think that they're improved, but I'm still that's why I said to be determined. And as for the other 2 points, I think Rutgers is definitely on the right path towards getting back to respectability, but we really don't know, in terms of who they played previously, and we certainly don't know with the Wolverines, because this past weekend, in all fairness, if there's a big surprise, I would say, without a doubt, the one thing that I am most surprised by is the poor play of Wisconsin this year.
The continued poor play of Wisconsin.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So it's like, I really don't know how good the Wolverines are. I think we'll have a better but not a conclusive understanding of that, because the Wolverines go on the road to Nebraska, who look much improved.
Yeah, and it's been a crazy season. I think it was 9 ranked teams lost this week, but you look at it and you go, it's easy to say, well, it's just Rutgers. But then you go, well, but look what Rutgers did against Michigan, and Michigan seemed to be having, off to a great start this season, playing with a lot of confidence. It wasn't just that they played Michigan tough. It's that they didn't give up a first down in the second half at all defensively. And you can go, well, and they also played better against Ohio State in the second half, but the difference is Ohio State didn't try real hard in the second half of the game. I mean, Kyle McCord and Jack Miller combined for 4 pass attempts, basically every drive after the first drive of the second half. Stroud went 17 of 23, 5 touchdowns, no interceptions, no sacks against their starting defense. So clearly he didn't struggle. The run game didn't struggle. Travion Henderson came out early after going for 71 yards and a touchdown on 8 carries. Marcus Crowley ended up with 58, Master Teague 52, and everybody averaged at least 4.7 yards a carry amongst them. So there really wasn't any struggle on the offensive side, but Ohio State has the number 1 offense in the country. So you go over the defensive side and you look and you say, this is a team that had been struggling on third down. They had been struggling in the passing game. They hadn't really shut down a run game completely. But I think that this was a complete game. And even if it's still not quite where it needs to be, this was a good performance by Ohio State. And you look at what this team that they played just did at Michigan, and it does. It just leaves you with questions. Is college football just weird, or this season, or does it have any meaning at all? Is there anything that can be gleaned? And I think you're right. I think it's certainly to be determined. So we look at the stats, and you, my friend, had some clicks in your picks to click because you had Jeremy Ruckert, and Jeremy Ruckert did quite well. He caught 4 passes in a true hashtag year of the tight end performance. 40 yards total, 1 touchdown. He got 23 yards after the catch. So a good outing for Jeremy Ruckert. And you also had on defense Ronnie Hickman, who finished with 11 tackles, 7 solos. He was everywhere, and they pointed him out on the broadcast time and time again. He's starting to settle into that role, that sort of hybrid safety bullet kind of thing that he's got going on.
Well, the thing about Jeremy Ruckert, I'm glad that he had a solid game, not just because I selected it, but I really do believe that he is going to be the kind of player that helps in the continuing evolution of C.J. Stroud, his maturity. Yes, there is. I mean, the talent at the wideout position Ohio State has is undeniable, but I think Ruckert just simply is going to be a matchup problem for, I'm not saying every defense, but a lot of the defenses that Ohio State is going to be facing. And I think it's just that safety blanket, knowing that, kind of that short to intermediate outlet route that he's probably running is going to become, or could become, C.J. Stroud's, best friend. Mm-hmm. And when we talk about Ronnie Hickman, count me as one of these people that I think of Ronnie Hickman as one of the very pleasant surprises of 2021 on the defensive side, simply because coming out of spring ball, I think the scuttlebutt, quite frankly, was that Craig Young was going to be the bullet. I mean, it just sounded as though Craig Young was the guy running, mm-hmm. running with the ones, and nothing against Craig Young. I mean, I've seen him coming in and doing well when in his limited opportunities coming in, but Ronnie Hickman has really kind of proved to be a revelation of sorts in terms of, like you said, flying all over the field, making tackles, in terms of his coverage. So, for a defense that has taken a lot of shots, from the fans, from social media, from all angles, it's nice to see that Ronnie Hickman is definitely one of these guys that Ohio State fans are certainly getting behind, and the broadcasters, regardless of which platform they're on, this past weekend being Big Ten Network, the broadcasters recognizing the talents that Ronnie Hickman brings to the field.
Yeah, and this is a team that, everybody said last week, it's just Akron. You should look good against Akron. You got much better athletes. Well, you also have much better athletes than Rutgers, but everybody knew this was going to be a much closer talent level than Ohio State and Akron, and it looked just as good. So the defensive coaching staff maybe starting to mesh a little bit. Maybe things are starting to get a little bit more comfortable. There's still a lot of rotation, but there doesn't seem to be as much as there was, and they're mixing and matching some different looks, and it's not as predictable.
Correct. And I think, Ross Fulton on Buckeye Scoop has made a point of that, in terms of when he starts diagnosing the improvement that he sees from the Ohio State defense, is that, like you just said, it's not as predictable. I mean, that they're trying to disguise the looks, the rotation is not nearly as, I have nothing against rotating players in. It just seemed as though there was no real rhyme or reason to it in the first couple weeks, and I think it's become a little bit more discernible in terms of why that is taking place. So yeah, like I said, I think the defense is certainly making strides, they have to continue to make strides because the upcoming opponents, such as Maryland, are going to really stress, the Ohio State defense. So we'll see, how much they've improved.
Yeah, I agree, and I want to see continued improvement from the defense. I liked what James Laurinaitis said is that a linebacker is on the defensive side is a lot like a running back. They can get into the rhythm of the game if you leave them out there and they start to see things and notice patterns and notice tells on the offense. They start to get into a rhythm just as much as a running back does. So I like that there's a little less of it, but I still like that there's some of it because I think that helped us see more of Steel Chambers, and I still think that he is an improving and impressive young athlete that he might have a bright future at that spot. So let's talk about my picks to click. I had Jackson Smith-Njigba. He was targeted 6 times, but only 2 catches, and he had 2 drops. He did go for 66 yards, no touchdowns. I'm going to say a non-click for Jackson Smith-Njigba because of the 2 drops. And on defense, I had Anton Jackson, which is a very off the beaten path pick. It's hard to get stats when you're a defensive tackle. He did end up with 1 tackle, but it was an assist. I'm going to say no click, even though he did do a lot of good things that defensive tackles are supposed to do when they're doing all the dirty work in the trenches and not getting the stats. And he certainly didn't get any stats, but I'm going to call that. If he had gotten a full solo tackle, I would give him a click, but just an assist. So I'm going to say neither of my picks click this week.
Okay, I mean, I'm just going to ask a quick question because I know we're going to talk about it. Did he grade out as a champion by the Ohio State coaching staff? Because I know that's something that we always bring up in terms of who graded out as champions. Because that might be the tiebreaker there in terms of if he did.
Sure. Before we get into that, is there anything else you want to cover from this game?
No, I mean, I think Rutgers. I mean, believe it or not, I'm anxious to be determined. They're playing Michigan State. Like in Michigan State, yeah, they won, and they have certainly been a surprise. But they gave up a ton of points and yards to Western Kentucky. So defensively, I don't know how good Michigan State is. I think Michigan State can certainly win. They're going on the road to Rutgers. But, yeah, I think Rutgers, it's going to be an interesting rest of the way. I mean, considering they started out 3-0, they've certainly got – I'm looking at their schedule right now. They certainly have at least 2 games that they will be favored, possibly 3 that they'll be favored. So I think they're definitely – I'll be surprised before we leave Rutgers. I will be surprised if Rutgers does not make a bowl game for 2021.
All right, let us get to the champions and the players of the game now. C.J. Stroud was named Big Ten Freshman of the Week for his 5-touchdown pass performance. And he was also the offensive player of the game for Ohio State. So big game for CJ and much deserved accolades there. Ohio State has won that Big Ten Freshman of the Week 5 weeks in a row. So some pretty good kids on this team.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I was going to say, no, I if anything, CJ Stroud, certainly for all of the abuse that he was taking from fans on social media about, he's terrible, they got to bench him. I mean, just fill in any of the negative things that you could possibly, I'm glad for him because he's certainly that performance that he gave on Saturday on the road at Rutgers against an improving Scarlet Knight team that gave the Wolverines all they could handle the previous week. I think his performance certainly justified Ryan Day's confidence and faith in him as Ohio State's starting quarterback.
Yeah, whenever I think of people giving C.J. Stroud a hard time, I just remember that there are people who don't think J.T. Barrett was a good quarterback in college. And then I relax and think, obviously there is a lot of people out there that don't know what they're talking about when it comes to college quarterbacks because J.T. Barrett was perfectly fine. I mean, the problem with C.J. Stroud is he's got not one tough act to follow, not 2. He's got a slew of tough acts to follow. I mean, the quarterback play on this Ohio State team for the last several years, the last several guys that have preceded him, has been off the charts, has been stuff that we've never seen. Record-breaking performance after record-breaking performance. We've seen season records fall. We've seen in-game records fall. We've seen career records fall like crazy the last few years. Well, that's what happens when you have a good coaching staff and you're recruiting great players, and that's what C.J. Stroud is coming in to do. And he's also a great player who was highly recruited, and he comes in and he's a freshman, and people are going to harp on the couple of passes that he missed and maybe looking erratic early in the game. We know he had some shoulder issues, so maybe that played into it. But he's also a kid. He's a freshman. He's a young man, and he still put up more yards in his first 3 games than anybody that came before him.
Right. Yeah, that's the thing. I think everyone, like you said, he's a kid, and everyone is expecting the finished product. Mm-hmm. And they, what's that old saying? It's like, okay, something about, it's like, okay, I don't care about the labor, just give me the baby kind of a thing. It's like, basically It's like, you don't care about all the hard work that goes into it. Ryan Day, to his credit, he knows exactly. He not only recruited C.J. Stroud, but he knows full well. All right, yeah, I've got this talent, but now we're gonna have to mold and shape and develop this kid. Even though the talent's there, it's a step up in the level of competition and defensive complexity that he probably didn't see out in California. So, like I said, I think his development has certainly been. It's certainly been not only a pleasure to see, but I'm like I said a few moments ago, I think his performance certainly justified the coaching staff's faith in him.
Mm-hmm. And he's just getting started. He's just literally just getting started.
Right.
It's almost as if the guy who sees him and his competition every single day in practice and breaks down film with him and knows what his reads are and knows where he should be going, what decisions he should be making. It's almost like that guy knows more than Joe Sixpack.
Almost.
Yeah,
almost.
All right, let's get to some more of these champions. So let's stay on offense. We talked about C.J. Stroud, the player of the game. Also grading out his champions, Master Teague, Marcus Crowley, Travion Henderson, Jeremy Ruckert, Mitch Rossi, Chris Olave, Luke Whippler, Thayer Munford, Nicholas Petit-Frere, and Matthew Jones. So not too bad there. I think there were a couple penalties keeping that from being a complete sweep by the offensive line. On defense, to answer your question from earlier, no, Antoine Jackson's not on here, and I don't know if that just comes down to the number of snaps because he didn't play a ton. Zach Harrison graded out as a champion. Tyleik Williams, who continues to be extremely impressive and maybe should be starting by now. Denzel Burke, Marcus Williamson, who I thought flashed throughout the game, and certainly the coaching staff obviously agreed with that. Cody Simon, Bryson Shaw, surprisingly, has graded out as a champion, and Ronnie Hickman, player of the game. So there you go. Your player of the game is your pick to click, and that's when somebody's clicking.
Well, I want to go back to a player that you mentioned on offense that graded out as a champion. And it certainly falls into the category of pleasant surprise because in all fairness, I thought maybe his season was done. Marcus Crowley, against Oregon, he was taken off the field. Mm-hmm. And we remember that, okay, he really didn't play last year, because of a knee injury that he had sustained a couple of years ago at the end of 2019. And he certainly showed on Saturday against Rutgers, he showed the same kind of burst and acceleration and, just tremendous potential that we saw when he was a freshman. So I'm happy to see that the coaching staff is certainly trying to get Marcus Crowley back into the rotation at running back. We have no idea. I think Travion Henderson was withheld from the game. I guess he kind of took a hard shot, and okay, the game was already won. So we'll find out as the week progresses in terms of Travion Henderson's health, but it doesn't seem anything too serious. How relieving it is to know that you've got players like Master Teague and Marcus Crowley come in. They didn't even miss Mayan Williams at the running back position. So, I mean, it's just the abundance of talent is something that I think just about every college football program in the country would be killing for the opportunity to have one of these guys. Ohio State has them just a plethora of reserves.
Yeah, Crowley ran for 8.3 yards per carry on average, which is only a little under what Travion Henderson ran for. So he certainly did play well when he had his opportunity. Another player we probably should point out that graded out as a champion, Thayer Munford. We didn't know if he was going to play in this game.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to see him come back. The offensive line, like you said, there might have been some penalties that kind of precluded them all from grading out as champions. But yeah, I think Thayer Munford. It's nice to see. It's nice to see he's back after sustaining that nagging injury a couple games ago.
Yeah, I think DeJuan Jones may have given up the sack to I think McCord maybe.
Yeah, McCord took a sack.
So I think that might have been DeJuan Jones's man, and then I think there were a couple penalties on. I just had a brain freeze. I just had a brain freeze.
I know that Nicholas Petit-Frere had a penalty that aroused the ire of the grumpy old Buckeye, because I know exactly.
Yeah, that's not even a penalty. That's not even a penalty.
It was a joke.
Yeah.
I can't believe that they called that. The Big Ten officiating needs to send Ohio State an apology for even calling that.
That was brutal. He just got mad because he got knocked down. He didn't like getting knocked down.
And embarrassed. That's all.
Exactly. I don't like it. I don't think it was a penalty. And he was already engaged with his man when the whistle blew, and so there wasn't really any real extra. He's just a large man. Can't give him a hard time for that. Paris Johnson, who I was thinking of, I think he had a couple of penalties in this game.
Okay.
Also, although I will say this, Ohio State got called for back-to-back penalties after the Rutgers targeting ejection, which I didn't really think was targeting. I thought that was kind of iffy. It did look like he hit with his helmet, but he looked like he was trying to lead with his shoulder, and then the landing point changed on him, kind of like what we saw with Trevor Lawrence in the Clemson game that Ohio State should have won but didn't. But that was nothing like what happened to Chris Olave earlier in the season and was let go. It was completely exonerated.
Yeah, they need to do something. I mean, it's the inconsistencies across the board in college football are just so glaring. They need to revamp. It is with good intentions that penalty was constructed, but the lack of uniform consistency in how it's applied and evaluated, it's making a mockery of what they thought was going to be a good idea.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's the same thing with instant replay. If you're going to have an official make a decision, you can't have officials overturning calls that are not obvious. That's the whole point. The whole point of having this system is that you're overturning obviously wrong calls. And like the Master Teague thing, there was no angle shown that was obvious. The only one that might have shown him short, you couldn't take anything from that because there was a player in the way and you couldn't see where the ball was. And if you look from the other angle, you couldn't tell if the ball had broken the plane. So sometimes they can piece those together, but that was not one of those cases. And I thought that should have just stood and as they say, ball don't lie, but Master Teague's not getting that touchdown back.
Right.
Mitch Rossi gets to be the beneficiary. Anyway, let's close out the champions. Special teams players of the game were DeMario McCall and Cade Koshersky. And scout team players of the week were Jacob James, Caden Saunders, and Jackson Kuach. So congrats to all for grading out champions and being players of the game. It was nice to be able to relax for a couple of weeks and have some enjoyment where you're just watching these kids get out there and play and make plays and do good things. And I'll say it again. I think Tyleik Williams is a freaking beast already, and he's just going to be a monster.
I agree. And I also agree that it's a matter of when he becomes a starter, not if, when he becomes a starter this season.
All right, Chip, you and I will talk a little bit about the Maryland Terrapins coming to Ohio Stadium. Terrapins had a rough weekend. We'll talk a little bit about the other scores around the Big Ten, some surprising, some not. And we'll, of course, give our picks to click and our score predictions a little later in the program. But let's get to this week's guest, who's going to tell us a little bit more about Maryland, about what happened in that Iowa game, and about what we can expect this Saturday. We'll get to that guest right after this. All right, joining us on the Silver Bullets podcast this week, we are happy to have with us the deputy editor at Testudo Times. That's SB Nation's blog that covers the Maryland Terrapins. Sam Oshtry is with us. Sam, thanks for coming on the Silver Bullets with us.
Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. I'm excited to preview this matchup this weekend.
Yeah, exciting season was underway. It looks like Maryland hit a little bit of a hiccup there with that game against Iowa, and I will be honest, I haven't had a chance to go back and review that game yet, and I haven't seen as much of Maryland this year as I would have liked, but 5 interceptions by Tagovailoa seems to be a pretty good indicator that things weren't going well. But what can you tell us about that? Was it offensive line related? Was it bad reads? Was it pressure? What led to that performance?
Yeah, so there was a lot. Obviously it was a highly anticipated game, Friday night lights, primetime matchup against a top 5 team in Iowa. You thought everything was in store for Maryland, maybe to pull off an upset, maybe to compete. Clearly did not go that way at all. At the end of the first quarter, 7-3, Maryland was up. And then early on in the second quarter, Dante Demas, obviously one of their star wide receivers, he fumbled a ball on a punt return and got injured on the play. And from there, everything just went completely south. Talia, uncharacteristically this season, threw 5 interceptions in one game. Through the first 4 games of the season, he only had thrown 1. So, that was a huge factor. The offensive line didn't have their best performance, but they were solid. It was Talia against a defense he hadn't seen before. One of the best, if not the best defense in the country in Iowa. Talia really looked rattled, to be honest. He just was missing throws, overthrowing some balls, hitting guys that really weren't even in stride, it looked like, and it was going into Iowa's hands. So obviously it wasn't Talia's best performance, and it was more an indicator of, okay, he had come pretty far in terms of limiting interceptions in his decision making, but this was certainly a setback, and we'll see how he responds this weekend.
So, Sam, this is Chip Minnich. You brought up Dante Demas. So the first question I have is if there is any status update, because as somebody who was watching the game, it wasn't necessarily Theismann-esque, but it certainly was not something that I wanted to keep watching over and over on replay, that hyperextended leg. And I guess, would you say that was kind of it seemed to me like the turning point in that game psychologically for Maryland after Demas fumbled that ball?
Yeah, I agree. It felt like it. Again, like I said, they were up 7-3. He fumbles that ball. Iowa's in great field position. They score a touchdown. They're up 10-7 at that point, and they just rolled on from there. But it certainly felt like it. He's not only a key part of that offense. He's a lot of the morale and a leader on that offense and on the team. So it really felt like at that moment when he went down, it all kind of just unraveled from there. He actually originally, like up in the press box, he didn't see the play, and a lot of the fans there didn't see it, and he was saying, like, I'm coming back, as he was getting carted off the field. You saw the replay, and it looked brutal. There's no update as of right now, just based on we haven't had an opportunity to speak with Loxley yet. The press conference will be tomorrow. Obviously, he'll give us whatever he knows, the timetable right after the game. He said he really wasn't sure, and I would be absolutely shocked if he was playing this week or the next week. We all saw it. It looked really bad. We don't know the extent of it yet. We know he was going in for an MRI, I believe, yesterday. We'll probably hear those results tomorrow when Loxley gives them to us. But I'm sure they won't be pretty.
Well, you mentioned Locksley just now, and for Ohio State fans that haven't gotten a chance to see Maryland under this regime here and see what this offense and defense have been doing the last couple of years, can you just give us an overview of the style of play that the Terps are employing these days? Because right now we're 5 weeks into the season. Maryland is just 2 wins from being bowl eligible. So clearly things are better in Maryland than they were just a few years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're seeing a shift in just like the culture, the attitude, not only around the team, but also on campus. It's just like this football team is obviously it was a setback last weekend, but this football team is growing. I mean, the players that Locksley's recruiting, there's more 4- and 5-star recruits than there had been in the last decade before in the last couple of years. So, I mean, the style of play, offensively, they like to play really fast. I mean, they go to a no huddle a lot. Talia likes to get the ball out quickly. Obviously, he's a dual threat quarterback. And up until last game, his decision making had been good, where he was, if he didn't see a throw that he liked and his pocket might have collapsed, he was running outside the pocket, creating space. They don't really have too much of a balanced attack in terms of their running and passing game. They certainly rely on a passing attack more, which makes sense because Talia is a good quarterback and they have elite weapons on the outside. And even their running back in Thayer Munford, he's more of a pass catcher too, and he's been really important in catching balls out of the backfield. So they don't really have too much of a balanced attack. It relies more heavily on the passing game, but that's for good reason based on their personnel.
So I want to flip over to the defensive side of the ball for Maryland and bring up a player who I think is tremendously underrated, and that is free safety Nick Cross. Can you give our listeners an idea in terms of the kind of player Nick Cross is for that Maryland secondary?
Yeah, he's been terrific and probably the best defensive player on the team. I mean, he has 2 interceptions on the year, 4 pass breakups, and 22 tackles. Nick Cross has been terrific, and he's a super hard hitter too. Like, he is really aggressive. He will attack wide receivers, running backs, wherever it is. So he really flies across that field. He's the leader back there in the secondary, and you can't really say enough about him this year. If there's been, even when there's bright spots for the team, there's down moments for the team, it's really Nick Cross and another guy, Tarheeb Still, who is a great cornerback for Maryland. Those 2 guys have been super consistent all year.
Yeah, let's stay on that defensive side of the football. And what can you tell us about your senior defensive lineman, Sam Okwayanonu? I'm sure I'm butchering that name, but 5 sacks already on the season for the senior. Is he the leader on that defensive front? What kind of front are we looking at here? Is this a 3-4, a 4-3? What is Maryland employing these days?
Yes. So, I mean, first, Loxley struggles to pronounce the name too. He just calls him Sam O. That is a tricky last name. But he really is the quarterback of the team. He is the quarterback of the team defensively. I mean, they really, when they need someone, when they need to rely on someone to energize them, whatever it is, he's the guy. I mean, he's also had a really productive and terrific season. They're really switched between 3-4 and 4-3. They're not playing one consistent scheme really. They like to switch around with that. But Sam O is the guy. He's done a great job of getting to the quarterback. And I think something that's underrated about this Maryland defense is how effectively they've gotten to the quarterback this season, which has helped their secondary. I mean, their secondary has been looked at this season as the strength of the team. We talked about Nick Cross, Tarheeb Still, Jordan Mosley. But I think it's underrated how much pressure they've been able to put on opposing quarterbacks, led by Sam O and a couple of those linebackers back there. That's really helped their secondary this year.
So I want to cycle back to the offense, and that is, I guess, obviously everything that Talia struggled with against Iowa notwithstanding. What kind of an impact has the new offensive coordinator, Dan Enos, had? Because something you mentioned that kind of sparked this question about Talia wanting to get the ball out fast, trying to move the offense quickly. Is that something that Dan Enos brought in, or is that something that you think that Mike Locksley has always wanted within the Terrapin offense?
Yeah, well, so Mike Locksley and Dan Enos knew each other very well. So this wasn't coming in when Dan Enos was hired. So it wasn't some outside hire. And something that Locksley really was high on when Dan Enos was hired was that he kept saying, like, this offense isn't changing around Dan Enos. I mean, Dan Enos is going to adapt our offense, and he understands the offense because he's been around him a lot. Both those guys have been around Thayer a lot, so they understood his play style. So that's really where it stems from. Just really, they like to play fast. They know the weapons that they have on the outside, getting people the ball quick and giving their playmakers the ball and letting their playmakers an opportunity to do what they do, which is make plays. That's really like what this offense is based on.
I saw a statistic, I think it was a week before last, about Maryland and under Tagovailoa and how they've done at home as opposed to on the road. And we did see a little bit of a struggle at Illinois earlier this season on the road. What is it about the team on the road, and what's different about the way they play away from home? Other than just, obviously home field advantage, you got your own crowd and that kind of thing. Is there any notable style change or something that they struggle with when they're not home?
Yeah, well, the first thing is that Illinois game. I mean, Maryland has played 5 games this year, and 4 of them have been at home. The lone one was Illinois, and that was Talia's first real road game because remember, he played 4 games as a starter last season, but there was COVID. There weren't real fans. There weren't real away atmospheres.
Right.
That was his first game as a quarterback playing on the road in front of which was a packed house in Illinois. So that obviously played a role in it, and he talked about that. It took him a bit of time to get going in that game. So I mean, I really think that plays a factor. This will be coming up this weekend, and Columbus will be Talia's second game on the road. And I think just getting adjusted to that road atmosphere when they haven't been able to travel a lot this year, because 4 out of the 5 games have been at home, and this is their first Saturday road game too, which I'm sure is going to be another great atmosphere in Columbus. So I think all that plays a factor.
So within that Maryland offense, we already talked about the unfortunate injury to Dante Demas. We're familiar with Rakim Jarrett, but what I'm asking you is, could you give us a player on offense? I guess you could say maybe like a sleeper that, all right, don't overlook. Obviously, like Jared is going to be a concern. Obviously, Taulia is going to be a concern, in terms of, like you said, not only passing, but running, but an offensive player that the Ohio State defense and the fans would be wise not to overlook this coming Saturday.
Yeah, I think I mentioned him earlier, but I didn't really elaborate on it. I think it's the running back, Tayon Fleet Davis, excuse me. He has become a really great pass catcher for this team more than anything. And it's not just the pass catching ability. He's also their number 1 running back. He has 47 attempts this year, averaging 7 yards a carry, and he has 4 touchdowns on the ground. Not to mention that he also has a touchdown catching the ball. So, he's become a threat out of the backfield as a pass catcher and as a runner. They weren't sure coming into this year after losing Jake Funk to the NFL, who's now in the Rams. He got all the carries. And Tayon Fleet Davis is a senior who really wasn't very experienced. He's made a huge impact on this offense early on in the season. I think when you have to worry about so many other weapons on the outside, it's created a path for him in both the running game and the passing game, especially because teams are really worried. Number 1, they're a pass-heavy offense, but when they can effectively move the ball on the ground, it opens up this offense like never before.
Sam, before we let you go, where do you see this game being won or lost in terms of what matchup is the key one in your view, and maybe we can get a score prediction from you?
Yeah. So I looked at the line. The line was Ohio State favored 21. This is Maryland's probably not going to win this game, but this is a huge opportunity to show to themselves and show to their fan base that they can compete after a massive letdown. It was really embarrassing, their performance, and they know it, in front of their home crowd, where they got the most electric atmosphere I've seen in College Park and in a long time, for about a quarter and then some, and then the fans started to get out of that stadium pretty quickly. So I think this is a huge bounce back spot for them, just in terms of being able to compete and showing that, okay, they're going against another one of the best teams in the country. How are they going to compete? How are they going to respond? Because they are talented. They do want to get to that 6-win benchmark for themselves. Mm-hmm. Where I see this game won or lost is really just in discipline. Maryland got destroyed in terms of turnovers, which Loxley categories as discipline issues, but really in terms of the penalties. They had 3 false starts in the first half last week, 3 defensive pass interference called, a roughing the passer called, and an unsportsmanlike conduct call, all in the first half, which is good for 7 penalties, I think. The stat math adds up correctly. It might even be more. But so it's really the discipline issue. It's been a problem all year, and they need to fix that against a team as good as Iowa, against a team as good as Ohio State this weekend. You can't have as many discipline issues and lose that many yards to penalties. So I think it's going to come down to that. I do think they're going to respond. My score prediction, I'm going to say 35-24 Ohio State.
All right, Sam Oshtry, the deputy editor at Testudo Times. Where can people find you and your work on the interwebs, when all of the interwebs are actually working, that is?
Yeah, I hope they're back up soon. You can find my stuff at Soshtry, Soshtry, on Twitter, Instagram, everything. And if you check out the Testudo Times site, you'll hear a bunch of our podcasts, a bunch of my work, and the rest of the team's work that we do there. Yeah, guys, thanks for having me. I'm going to be in Columbus this weekend too. I'm coming for the game. Well,
you're probably one up on both of us, because I'm in Orlando, Florida, and Chip's in the northern part of the state. So I don't know, Chip, are you heading down there this weekend?
I am. I actually am heading down.
There you go. You guys
found out today I have tickets.
Nice. You guys should have lunch.
That's awesome. Definitely meet up. It's my first time in Ohio, so I'm excited.
All right, Sam Oshtry, thank you so much for being with us and telling us a little bit about the Maryland Terrapins, and we'll catch up with you again down the line somewhere.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks, guys.
And we are back. Thank you one more time to Sam Oshtry from the Testudo Times, a very good SB Nation blog covering not just Maryland football, but all Maryland sports. They do a good job of giving all of the non-big revenue sports equal time. So, thanks to him for being with us, and good job by them on not just covering the football and the basketball, but all of the sports, and giving everybody their moment to shine.
Yeah, and I thought Sam, he was very thorough in his analysis of the positives that Maryland. It's obvious. I know they did not play well against Iowa this past week, but they certainly have shown dramatic improvement. And I think this game. Stop me if you've heard this before, Michael. I think this game is going to be. I think it's going to be tighter than Ohio State fans probably are anticipating. I certainly think tighter than that point spread that Vegas put down.
Well, there's two things at play here. Maryland, by the way, Maryland did host Iowa. Number 5 Iowa came in, and we had talked about how Maryland was better at home than on the road in terms of their performances and their point spread and their yards per game and their points per game. But they got waxed 51-14, and that is almost the same score that Ohio State beat Rutgers by. But Maryland was at home, and as he mentioned, as Sam said, 7-3 Maryland led after one. The second quarter, Chip, Iowa outscored Maryland 31-0.
Right. I didn't stick with it, but I brought it up in our conversation with Sam, is the kickoff return that Dante Demas, it looked to me like he hyperextended his leg. I can't remember who it was, but somebody on Twitter was saying, "Okay, please, FS1, we don't need to see this."
Yeah,
they
like to do that.
Please quit showing the replay. I really did think that was just kind of as soon as Demas fumbled the ball and Iowa recovered, it seemed like that's when the floodgates came crashing down. That's just my opinion.
So the interesting thing Sam said was that was the trip to Illinois was Taulia Tagovailoa's first road game, and he said it was packed. And I believe the attendance for that game, Chip, was 37,000 at Champaign, just over 37,000 fans. So about 70,000 fewer fans that Tagovailoa is going to have to play in front of on Saturday. And the big question is, can he shake off that Iowa game, and will Ohio State's crowd let him shake off the Iowa game?
That's a really good question. Ohio State, it's a noon kickoff, and we all know how sometimes Ohio State fans kind of are just, when it comes to the noon kickoff, it's like it doesn't give me enough time to tailgate. I certainly hope that they show up and are going to do everything they can to be as vocally disruptive to Taulia, so that it doesn't allow that Maryland offense to get clicking and start being productive on the field.
Yeah, because this is an Ohio State defense that has been susceptible to the pass. It's an athletic quarterback. They already are struggling to get pressure on the quarterback. So it's not a great matchup if he is comfortable. So they have to make him uncomfortable. And I don't know that it's that Ohio State fans don't have time to tailgate. I think they're still hungover from Friday night. But, by those 3:30 kicks and those night games, you have time to shake that off, get some Alka-Seltzer in you, drink some water, hydrate, and then you're good to go.
Okay. Might be on to something there. I don't know.
Let us go to Happy Valley, where the Penn State Nittany Lions, ranked 4th in the country, defeated Indiana 24-0. And it's terrible for Indiana. They're 2-3. They're 0-2 in the Big Ten. They're not having the season that you and I and many had envisioned that they would have this year. But they also lost Michael Penix in this game to a separated shoulder.
Yeah, I think Indiana, this is definitely going to be gut check time because, right now, in terms of, when you look at, they've got the week off, but, like their upcoming schedule, Michigan State, they play Ohio State, they go on the road to Maryland. They still have to play Michigan. There are some tough games. So this might be gut check time for Indiana in terms of using the bye week wisely and figuring out what it is that they do well. Because like you said, Michael Penix is going to be out for at least, for the foreseeable future. And they need to kind of figure out what they're doing and get it corrected before play resumes.
Yeah. Let's go to Madison, Wisconsin, hosting Michigan. You thought that Wisconsin might be able to pull the upset here. I have not liked what I've seen from Graham Mertz and the Wisconsin Badgers this year, and it got even worse when Graham Mertz got knocked out of the game. But the Badgers, you can't spell Badgers without B-A-D. And the Badgers are bad this year. They are 1-3, 0-2 in the Big Ten. I picked them as my Big Ten West winner, and I am looking pretty bad about that so far. And Michigan wins easily, 38-17. Wisconsin didn't do very well defensively. They couldn't keep their offense on the field to give their defense a rest. They didn't they're not running the ball particularly well, and I think that's the main problem with Wisconsin is this is a team that is predicated on we can run the football, and anything else we do is built off of that. And if you're not having success running the football and that's the way your team is built, you're in a lot of trouble.
Oh, big time. And to make, like you said, to make matters worse, Graham Mertz, who hadn't been playing all that well, now he's out, which is forcing Wisconsin to go to Chase Wolf as their quarterback. And let's just throw another log onto the fires of controversy. They get to go on the road to play Burt at Illinois this weekend. So,
yeah.
And I think Wisconsin can rebound, but it's not looking good. You're not alone in thinking that Wisconsin was going to be much better. That will be the thing that as this season progresses is that I will without a doubt say that Wisconsin has been the biggest disappointment surprise in the sense that I thought Wisconsin was going to be so much better than they were. I really thought as I look back at their schedule, I really thought right now we'd be talking about a 4-0 team, and instead we're talking about a 1-3 team.
And it really is illustrated by the fact that they went to a neutral site and got killed by Notre Dame, and then Cincinnati went to Notre Dame and walked out of there with a win like it was nothing. So, not like it was nothing. They didn't just run away with the game, but they won at Notre Dame, actually in Notre Dame's stadium. And not only that, I don't know if you watched that game, Chip, but there was a lot of Cincinnati red in that stadium at Notre Dame.
Yeah, I think Luke Fickell, all of the chatter about him possibly leaving for greener pastures. One of the things that I enjoyed about last week leading up to that game at Notre Dame is, some of the behind the scenes articles about, how happy Luke Fickell and, more importantly, his wife is, down in Cincinnati. Like, she is very much, wanting to stay in Ohio because that's where their family roots are. Just she likes the consistency of what they are building in Cincinnati. And by all indications, seems to me that, the move to the Big 12 is something that, is going to be very, very difficult for any of these quote unquote big time schools, like USC, is going to be able to effectively compete with, because if he can compete for national titles with Cincinnati moving to the Big 12, I think he might have found a home until when or if like a job like Ohio State, which is probably his dream job, would ever come open.
Well, I'm glad that you brought up all of that, because funny enough, I was just going to say this, because we were just comparing, if I could learn to speak properly, just comparing Wisconsin's trip to play Notre Dame with Cincinnati's trip to play Notre Dame. And I was going to say, the way Wisconsin has been this year, where does this program go if Paul Chryst is not the guy? And there's no indication that they'll make a change, based on 1 year, but I think it's safe to say Wisconsin hasn't been Wisconsin for about at least 2 years. And if Paul Chryst isn't the guy, then who do you go get? And maybe the guy you go get is a Midwestern guy who can play that type of football and can develop players who maybe some of the big programs don't snap up, which is the exact definition of Wisconsin. Wisconsin would be a fantastic place for Luke Fickell to land. Now, would he be interested in that? I don't know. But there's two things that can happen to Cincinnati going to the Big 12. One of them is that they can go in and compete for championships every year. Another one of them is that they can go in and it just suddenly the wheels fall off and they go back to being sort of a middle of the road program. So what do you think of a Luke Fickell to Wisconsin situation?
I think, like you said, it might be a little premature, because I think Paul Chryst, I know that Barry Alvarez is no longer the athletic director, but I kind of look at him, minus the volcanic angry outbursts that Woody Hayes had. But I look at him as kind of like that in all fairness, as kind of like that guiding, Godfather principal type, emeritus, since he built the structure that Wisconsin football has had since 1990. I think he's going to probably be able to wield some considerable influence behind the scenes if people were to start to grumble. Like, don't forget, I mean, we just talked about Bielema. He left Wisconsin for what he thought were greener pastures. So I think Alvarez would be the kind of person to remind people, hey, look what happened when we had to go out and get somebody like Gary Anderson. Didn't work out. They were fortunate and able to get Paul Chryst to bring him there. I think he's going to get a mulligan for this year, and I would say as much as one for next year before I think the seat starts to get a little warm. But to your question, I think Luke Fickell would certainly consider it. My money is, if it's not Ohio State, I think like Penn State. I think the team that he just beat, Notre Dame, Wisconsin, they certainly fit the bill of what he would be looking for. He and his wife, would be looking for that Midwestern type, small town. I shouldn't say small town, but college town atmosphere that would allow them to raise their family.
Yeah, I kind of agree in that I don't think Paul Chryst is going anywhere yet, but I could see a scenario where if Wisconsin, for example, doesn't even get bowl eligible this year and they're kind of mediocre next year. I mean, I think there's a lot of people already that are a little salty that Jack Cohn left because they picked this Graham Mertz guy, and Graham Mertz has not been great. So maybe that's a little chink in the armor there for Paul Chryst, and then this season certainly isn't going very well for them. And they just have not looked like Wisconsin's typical selves the last couple of years. And again, it's been a crazy couple of years for everybody. I think that's a program that it's just built to a T for a Luke Fickell type.
It certainly could be. I think Luke Fickell, like you said, I mean, like, the advantages are there. I think the fact that he has spent time, like Barry Alvarez did, rebuilding the program. When Barry Alvarez first went to Wisconsin, in 1990, they were terrible, and within within a 4-year span, he had Wisconsin going to the Rose Bowl. And when you compare that to, what Luke Fickell walked into, Tommy Tuberville had Cincinnati in very bad shape. Luke Fickell was able to, recruit a lot of the talent down in the Cincinnati area and rebuild that program. And now he has them in discussion, at least, for being a college football playoff participant. So I can certainly see the similarities.
Yeah. All right, let's get through the rest of these scores. Michigan State, Chip, 1 game from bowl eligibility, 5-0 after a win over Western Kentucky. That game ends up 48-31, but it was 42-16 at the half. So Sparty had things pretty well in control by the midway point.
Yeah, and I thought I saw something on television that this is the first time since 2015 that Michigan State has started 5-0. So that's, you're talking back in 2015, as Ohio State fans are loath to remember. That's when Michigan State beat Ohio State and took their spot in the college football playoff. So this coming weekend at Rutgers, certainly, like you said, it represents one win from getting to that bowl eligibility that I certainly did not think was going to be coming this year. So if they don't get it at Rutgers, I think they'll definitely get it the following week when they play Indiana.
All right, so Mel Tucker right now is Kirk Ferentz's biggest challenger for Big Ten Coach of the Year, I think.
Oh, certainly.
Yeah.
And in his case, it would certainly be well-deserved, I would say.
Absolutely. Mel Tucker's got that team well ahead of schedule. Kenneth Walker is having a great season.
Right.
And I think that's been a great addition to the team for them. So the Spartans will get a better sense of whether or not they're for real when they start facing a little bit more sturdy competition, because they are just a week removed from having struggled a little bit against Nebraska, although Nebraska looks like it is a little bit better. The Fighting Birds were at home against Charlotte, and a little non-conference action for Illinois. They trailed 14-10 at the half, but they win with a 14-0 third quarter and win 24-14. Not terribly impressive from Burt, but it's a win. They're 2-4, and as you pointed out, Burt gets to play the Badgers.
He does. I will be immensely surprised if Illinois, even though they're at home, if they do it against Wisconsin. But the storylines, I'm sure, are going to be intriguing nonetheless.
Yeah. Minnesota went to Purdue, and it's the Gophers winning 20-13 in a low-scoring affair, and more potential problems for Minnesota, though, as their backup running back Potts had gone to the hospital. And we don't know what the status is there, but we do know that they're already down a starter, so things are a little bit thinning out for the Golden Gophers right now.
Right. I mean, if anything, if they, and you can certainly hope that Trayson Potts, whatever the issue is, that he recovers quickly. The nice thing for Minnesota is they have this coming week off as a bye week. So it's an opportunity to not only for Trayson Potts, but for Minnesota, if there are other players that are hurting, a week off, as we saw with C.J. Stroud, could certainly do wonders. And for Minnesota to kind of figure out other areas on the team that they can possibly improve before they resume play against Nebraska on October 16th.
Yeah, this was another game where Minnesota was down at the half, 13-10. and they just outscored Purdue 10-0 in the second half. So a lot of outscoring the other team after trailing in the first half. That didn't happen at Rutgers, but it did happen elsewhere in the Big Ten. And then I don't know what's going on with Northwestern, but they got the doors beaten off of them by the Nebraska Cornhuskers 56-7 in Lincoln. And just a good old-fashioned tail kicking.
Oh, yeah. And, I mean, when you talk about, how, we joke about it, but the whole, like, up and down, the inconsistency of Northwestern, it's like one good year and then a bad year kind of a thing. But this is, without a doubt, from what I understand, the worst defensive stretch in Pat Fitzgerald's tenure. I know that Jim O'Neill, he's the new defensive coordinator, is coming in for for Mike Hankwitz, who retired, but they've got to figure out something, because they're giving up 500 something yards a game. Like like you said, Nebraska blew them away, and they still have to play some of the other teams within like they have Michigan on the horizon at the end of October. They still have to play Iowa. Wisconsin's struggling, but still, they've got some games coming up that, it does not look like a good season at all for Northwestern in any way, shape, or form.
No, to your point, Northwestern ranks 114th in total defense in the country, 450 yards, 449.2 they're giving up per game. That's bad.
Yes, and like I said, it's that's kind of for a Northwestern team that, let's face it, has kind of made their reputation for playing teams tough on defense.
Yeah.
It's like if this isn't, if you don't have, because let's face it, they were not looking good offensively. Now you're talking about what you thought was going to be what you thought was going to be the strength of the team has completely collapsed. Like I said, I think things could really get out of hand really, really quickly.
Yeah, they're the teams that they're sandwiched in between. They are one spot above Akron in total defense, and they are worse than their fellow nerds from Vanderbilt.
Again, very, 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 very bad.
Yeah. All right, and so that is our trip around the Big Ten. Northwestern, by the way, 2-3 overall, 0-2 in the Big Ten. Nebraska improves to 3-3 and 1-2. The first Big Ten win for the Huskers this year. It's been an interesting week. It's up and down. Scott Frost has been losing close games. Sometimes he wins by a lot, though, and he was able to do that at home against Northwestern. It was, he needs to pile up wins, because the natives are getting restless in Nebraska. He's the chosen child, the favorite son that's coming home to rescue everything after having a great outing at Central Florida, and it's not been what Nebraska fans thought it would be. It's not been the homecoming that they were hoping for.
It hasn't been, but this coming week against Michigan at home at night, I think it certainly represents a tremendous opportunity for Scott Frost to show, if not necessarily a win, how well they play against Michigan, because from what I understand, Nebraska's win against Northwestern was the most dominant win they've had against a conference opponent since they joined the Big Ten back in 2011. So, something to build upon. The previous weeks, like the way that they lost in Michigan State had to be, just excruciatingly frustrating. To lose on special teams, the way they played in the Week 0 game against Illinois, they played Oklahoma really, really tough. You're talking about a 3-game swing that, if those had gone in Nebraska's favor, the whole tenor of the discussion around Nebraska football is completely different. So I think I think this is a tremendous opportunity for Nebraska to play well against a very improved Wolverine team, I'm not saying they're necessarily going to win, but I think that they certainly can do enough to kind of show that Scott Frost needs to stay on as the Cornhuskers head coach.
Yeah, the big trick for Nebraska against Michigan, they're going to have the good atmosphere. We know that. Can they stop Blake Corum? If they can stop Blake Corum and make Michigan predictable, then Michigan could be in trouble. But so far, Michigan has not really struggled to run the football against anybody except for in the second half against Rutgers. They had some difficulty in the second half of that game once Rutgers made some adjustments. But if you can shut down Michigan's run game, Cade McNamara has not been awesome. He's been good. He's been serviceable. He's been efficient, but he hasn't had to win a game for them. He hasn't really had to put the team on his shoulders this year. So we'll see if Nebraska can make him have to do that. I think I'd be interested to see how good Michigan is when they have to do that. Also, Michigan's defense has been pretty solid this year. Right. Of course, the marquee matchup is Penn State at Iowa. So one of those teams is going to get their first loss this season, and they're both 5-0. They're both 2-0 in the Big Ten. That's going to be one worth watching. We already talked about Wisconsin going to Illinois, Michigan State going to Rutgers, and of course Maryland going to Ohio State. Let's talk a little bit more about Maryland going to Ohio State. Chip, I gotta know what your thoughts are on this Maryland team, because I don't know how good they are. I don't know how good their offense is. I don't know how good their defense is. And they just got the living daylights beat out of them, mainly in one quarter, by Iowa. Iowa's a good football team, but is Maryland a good football team? We don't know.
We don't know. And if there's encouraging things for me as it relates to Ohio State with this matchup, is that the secondary has certainly improved since the beginning of the season. We talk about the emergence of Denzel Burke. Mm-hmm. We talk about in terms of just the pre-snap lineup is not necessarily as predictable. I mean, just a lot of things I think that have certainly made Ohio State look much better. What concerns me is the fact, and Sam touched on it, is the dual threat capability of Taulia Tagovailoa, not only his passing, but his running. And the linebackers, this is where you're going to really need somebody that can track to eliminate, in terms of when he drops back and if he's flush from the pocket, if Taulia can pick up positive yardage with his legs, keeping those drives alive. That's what has me concerned going into this game.
Mm-hmm. The Maryland Terrapins have 11 turnovers in their past 3 games, Chip. 7 of those came against Iowa. Did they get it all out of their system because they're about to come play a team that's, I think, has had a pick 6 3 games in a row?
I would like to say that they haven't, and that Ohio State's going to keep the misery index going for Maryland. I just don't know. I've seen Maryland play against West Virginia. Obviously saw a little of the wheels falling off, so to speak, against Iowa. I don't know how good they are. I mean, the fact that they kind of went down to the wire against Illinois, I just think, like you said, I think Ohio State defensively, they're going to need to play at their best. And we've been talking about, hey, they've improved. So this represents another big test for the Ohio State defense.
Yeah, when you look at this team, and we touched on it in our talk with Sam Oshtry earlier, they're going to go how Taulia Tagovailoa goes. They're going to be as good as he is on offense, and he's been good. Even though he had a lot of turnovers this past week, he's completing 72% of his passes, Chip. So he's getting the ball out. He's getting it to the right guy. He's making the right read. Of course, he threw 5 picks, and he's thrown 6 all season, 5 of them in one game. 12 touchdowns to 6 picks. He's still throwing 2 touchdowns for every interception, even with that aberration of a game. So he's still getting it done, and as you mentioned, he can get it done with his legs as well. Tayon Fleet Davis, the top running back, is running for 7 yards per carry. It's not a lot of runs, though. He's only averaging 66 yards a game. They don't run the ball as much. They are a pass-heavy team, as Sam mentioned, and Mike Loxley's offense is predicated on passing. When you look at this team, this Maryland team, you see a team that is they're kind of sort of upper middle part of the country in terms of scoring offense. They're 45th in the country. They're averaging 32.6 points per game. Their rushing offense is only 78th in the country at 152 yards per game. But when you're getting 7 yards a carry out of Fleet Davis, you're doing some things well. And also when you get your quarterback who can take off and do RPOs, you're going to be able to get some first downs that way. Their passing offense is very good, 13th in the country at 317 yards a game. And total offense, 24th in the country, 469 yards a game. That's a lot of yards. They're not always cashing in on the end of those drives, though.
Right. Like you said, I think the fact that it's pass heavy could lend itself. I mean, it's one of the interesting, I guess, for lack of a better word, chess match areas that we're going to be seeing, because let's face it, the Ohio State defense, the secondary is playing better. Like you said, that they've been starting to capitalize on turnovers. But I think you and I would probably be in agreement here, is that the Ohio State pass rush is improving, but it's still not nearly where it needs to be in terms of, forcing, a quarterback into, like hurrying their throws and, those kind of things. I think that's another area that's of concern, is the Ohio State pass rush against such a very powerful Maryland passing offense.
Yeah, they're not getting a lot of sacks, but what I do like that I see them doing is they're creating a little bit of havoc with the quarterback and making them make bad throws. And I would like to see a little more in terms of the sacks, obviously, but with Tagovailoa, I would kind of like to see them pin him in and not let him escape the pocket and then take their chances. I like what Denzel Burke has brought to the table. I like seeing what Ronnie Hickman's been doing. I think Cam Martinez is getting more and more plays as well, and I think that's a good thing. It's gonna be really down to can the crowd and can the defensive line and maybe some of the confusion that maybe the Buckeyes can create, can they affect Tagovailoa and make him make some bad decisions or bad throws or bad reads? And if they get to him early, it could snowball after the game that he's coming off of. So we'll have to see how mentally tough he is, how resilient he is, how much he can put that game behind him, and if Ohio State can make him doubt himself again like he did in that game against Iowa. So we'll have to see how that chess match kind of all plays out. Defensively, Maryland is, again, kind of middle of the country, 46th in scoring defense, allowing 21.6 points per game. And the rush defense has been pretty good, 38th in the country, allowing 118 yards per game. And Ohio State will certainly challenge that number. If Trey Henderson can play, he's always a threat to get that by himself. Passing defense has been bad. Maryland is 75th in the country, allowing 231 yards per game. We talked about their secondary a little bit. Some of the guys they got back there are pretty good players. And maybe some of that pass defense those numbers might have suffered because they are 5-0, or they had got off to a good start. They did lose this week. They had got off to a good start, and teams were having to pass against them.
Yeah, I think this certainly represents an opportunity for Ohio State to capitalize on Maryland's defensive liabilities, and we'll see how Ryan Day chooses to attack. If they also, like you said, Travion Henderson, we're still unclear about his health status. I'm looking forward to seeing him play, but we'll see.
They asked Ryan Day at halftime, and he said he was fine. So was Ryan Day lying? Maybe. He usually doesn't even offer an answer. It's like, yeah, we're not talking about that. But he's like, yeah, he's fine. And so they didn't need him. So it would be interesting to see if Rutgers had made it a game, would he have been back in the field or not? But we will never know that. Total defense, just to close out Maryland's rankings, 56th in the country. They allow 350 yards per game. And when you consider that Ohio State is very, very good in total offense. In fact, tops in the country at 555.6 yards per game. I think it bodes well that Ohio State's going to be able to move the ball, probably get some points. And the question is, does this become a shootout, or does Ohio State win this game comfortably? So I'm going to ask you for your score prediction. But before I do that, I'm going to ask you for your picks to click. And I think, if I can look at my little sheet here, that last week we picked our offensive picks to click first. So we're going to start on defense, Chip. Chip, who is your defensive pick to click against the Maryland Terrapins?
I'm going to go a little bit off the grid slightly. I'm going to go with Cameron Martinez.
Okay. I don't think that's a bad pick. I think that the secondary is going to get tested, and we've seen Cam Martinez fly around the ball a lot. So if he's out there and there are plays to be made, he's probably got a pretty good chance to make some of them. I am going to go. I know we've been going to the well a lot, and it hasn't been paying off, at least early in the season. I thought he had a pretty good game last week, and I picked him way back in the Minnesota game. But I thought he played well this week against Rutgers, so maybe he's gotten healthy. Maybe he's gotten some of the rust shaken off. I'm going to go with Javonte Jean-Baptiste.
Okay.
I was going to go with Ronnie Hickman, but I think Ronnie Hickman is now putting up the kind of numbers defensively that TreVeyon Henderson is putting up offensively. So it's almost like a cheat pick.
I wouldn't have said it was a cheat pick, but I understand.
Yeah. I just think Hickman is going to be around the ball a lot, and he's either going to be making plays down the field or at the line of scrimmage, and he's going to probably, again, get 7 or 8 tackles this week, and we'll be saying that he's a click. So, I'll go with Javonte Jean-Baptiste. I think he flashed for me this week, and maybe that's a sign that one of these defensive ends is finally going to shake loose. But I will point out Zach Harrison did great out as a champion this week as well.
Very good point.
Offensively, all right, I'm going to go back to the well again on offense as well, because I think he's going to shake off those drops last week, and I think Jackson Smith-Njigba has a bounce-back week.
Okay. I'm going to stick with the wide receivers, and this might fall into the category of a cheat pick, but I'm going to go with Garrett Wilson. I think this is the kind of game that Garrett Wilson kind of, no offense to Chris Olave, but I think Garrett Wilson this is the kind of game that's going to showcase him as being the top Ohio State wide receiver in the 2022 NFL draft ahead of Chris Olave. That's my opinion.
Wow, that's a statement from you. That is a statement, and it may be a correct one. I mean, Olave's coming off the better game, so yeah, it should be Garrett Wilson's turn, right?
Yeah, exactly.
See, he's coming off 119 yards, 2 touchdowns, and Wilson's coming off 71 yards, 1 touchdown with 2 fewer catches. Chris Olave made that ridiculous catch on the sideline on Saturday that they reviewed, and I'm like, why are you...
Chris Carter-esque.
Yeah, like, why are you even bothering us with this review? It's clearly a catch. It's clearly a first down. But yeah, they went and looked at it, and confirmed catch. All right, so that takes care of our picks to click. You're going with Cameron Martinez and Garrett Wilson. I've got Javonte Jean-Baptiste and Jackson Smith-Njigba because I'm going with all the hyphens this week. I didn't realize that, but now I see it. So there's only one thing left for us to do, Chip. And in our breakdown of Maryland, what stood out to you? What's going to be the score prediction? What do you think is going to happen on Saturday?
I like Sam's score prediction, so I'm gonna copy it. I'm gonna go 35-21. I think even though Ohio State is improving defensively, I have a feeling that in some way, shape, or form, that Ohio State, they're gonna try to slow the game down to their liking. So part of me almost thought about selecting a running back. The reason why I didn't is, quite frankly, not knowing the full health of Travion Henderson kind of led me to going with Garrett Wilson. But I really do. I think the running game is going to play a significant portion in the second half to protect the Ohio State defense, and I think that's going to make all the difference. 35-21.
All right, I'm going to go a little bit higher scoring than you. I'm going to go 41-23. I think Ohio State's offense has proven to be a little bit better than what Maryland's averages are at. They're going to be certainly the best offense that Maryland has faced this year. And I think that if Maryland doesn't turn the ball over, Ohio State will have to go further down the field to score than Iowa had to go a lot of the time or this past weekend. Their numbers weren't crazy, even though they had the lopsided win. But I'm going to go 41-23. I think Maryland will move the ball. I think that Ohio State will probably bend some in this game, maybe not break as much as they did early in the season. We'll have to see how it goes. Maryland's going to test them. They're going to stress them a little bit, and this is going to be the first real test of did this defense improve since the changes were made to the way the coaches their responsibilities have been shifted around.
Okay.
All right. Well, we'll come back not next week, Chip. You and I are going to take the bye week with the team, and we'll be back in 2 weeks with the new episode of the Silver Bullets podcast. But before we end this one, of course, we got a little housekeeping to do, and I think it's a good time to do what I forgot to do last week and tell everybody to please check out all the other shows at BuckeyesScoop.com. All the other podcasts, very solid podcasting group. We've got the Morning Scoop, you got the Buckeye Weekly, you got the Sloopcast, you got recruiting, specific ones. There's a lot of good stuff to listen to, and of course you can become an insider, and it's a great, never not a great time to become an insider and join the insider message boards over at BuckeyesScoop.com. Chip, where can folks find you on the internet?
I can be found on Twitter at Chip Minnich. Last name is spelled Minnich, and I'm a contributor to Athlon Sports. Look for an article previewing the Maryland-Ohio State game later this week on athlonsports.com.
All right. You can find me on Twitter at Mike36Fan. And, of course, on BuckeyesScoop.com, I write the Grumpy Old Buckeye column every week. You can go read my Rutgers report, where obviously there was not a lot to grump about in the Rutgers game. I still managed to do it, and I also gave my first ever grump on behalf of the opposing team because I thought that the ejection and the targeting call was not good, and I disliked it. So I actually gave Rutgers a pity grump this week.
There you go.
All right. Well, again, we won't be back next week, but the week after that, we'll come back and we will talk about the Maryland game. We will prepare for Indiana. I believe it is Indiana. Is that correct, Chip?
It is. You got it. Kickoff time will be announced probably next week, so we'll definitely know for sure in 2 weeks. So.
All right. Well, it'll be a Michael Penix-free Indiana Hoosier team, and we'll have to see how everything comes together for the Hoosiers between now and then. But we'll see you guys in 2 weeks. The only thing left for us to do, Chip, is what we always do at the end. Go Bucks!
Go Bucks!